Swipa, did you see Bam? 5 of 11 from three-point range in the Heat scrimmage. 11 three-pointers. Who saw that one coming?
Yeah, no, I didn't, because I did not watch basketball on UPN last night. The real question and the real story is that the Oklahoma City Thunder look like the real deal, and I think they legitimately could run the Western Conference.
Okay, we're going to talk about all that, plus Zion Williamson shows out in his preseason debut, and Ja Morant injures his ankle not once but twice. That's all today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. This is a special afternoon edition of Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Doug Branson from the Locked On Hornets podcast. I'll be your tour guide, your shot clock Sherpa, as we whip around the Locked On Podcast Network of NBA podcasts, breaking down the biggest NBA stories from the local experts. Speaking of local experts, I'm joined by the real stars of this show from the Locked On Heat podcast, Wes Goldberg. Wes, what did you see in the NBA last night?
Well, I witnessed Zach Edey almost break a basketball hoop completely, so that was exciting.
That was a little dangerous, honestly. He is an absolute monster out there. Swipa from the Locked On Nuggets podcast. Swipa, what'd you see in the NBA last night?
Yeah, it looks like the Oklahoma City Thunder might end up having the best defense in the league with Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. So they're going to be a problem for everybody else in the NBA.
A lot happened in the NBA last night. Ja Morant made his debut only to have it cut short by a freak ankle injury. The Magic extended someone on their roster, but his name is not Jaylen Suggs, and Shaden Sharp's absence may open up a major NBA redemption story. We are going to talk about all of that. But first, Zion Williamson made an absolute statement in his preseason debut. If you didn't see it, he went 8 of 11 from the field, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals, all in just 19 minutes of action. After an offseason focused on conditioning and health, it looks like Zion is ready to take his game to new heights this season, and maybe all NBA heights. Let's hear from Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans, who has more insight on Zion's performance and what it means for the Pelicans moving forward.
He looked in shape. He was running around. He was on ball. He was off ball. He was using ball screens. He was setting screens. Just Zion being the dominant force that is Zion Williamson, getting into the paint and scoring, drawing 2 to the ball, and then passing. So for him to have that kind of activity in game 1, oh yeah, sign me up. I'm really excited about that. That's the type of Zion Williamson that if you get from game 1, changes the trajectory of this Pelicans season entirely. No more bad starts to the year. No more waiting for him to get in shape to figure it out, for it to click. Whatever Zion 0.0 we're on right now, you're seeing it in action.
A lot of NBA fans have commented on the slimmed down look of Zion, and he was on full display last night. Where does a healthy, motivated, and svelte Zion put the New Orleans Pelicans on the Western Conference pecking order? Wes, you get the first word.
Well, it definitely helps, right? We saw Zion Williamson playing dominantly towards the end of last season, basically after the in-season tournament. He looked amazing. He played 70 games for the Pelicans. He was playing like an all-NBA player towards the end of last year. And then what happened? He gets hurt in the play-in tournament, even while he's out playing LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So with Zion, yes, if he's playing at an all-NBA level, it changes the ceiling for the Pelicans completely. My thing is, Zion's starting to enter almost that Kawhi Leonard territory of I just won't believe it until I see it, and I might not even fully believe it even when I see it, because I'm not going to believe it until it's the end of the season and he's put together the whole package. And so, because it could go kaput in any minute. So yeah, with Zion, sure, it's awesome that he's playing like this. Hats off to the Pelicans. For Zion, Pelicans fans, yeah, it's great to see him playing like this in the first game of the preseason, but to me, it just doesn't matter until we're in the playoffs, and even then, it might not matter until we're done with the playoffs, because until he's actually lifting a Larry O'Brien trophy, just with Kawhi Leonard, I'm just not going to believe it until I see it all done.
Okay, so it's going to take an LOB for Wes to buy it. Do you have your standards set that high, Swipa?
Here's the thing. I don't think the Pelicans are going to be contending for anything in the Western Conference, but I do think that Zion being healthy will put them in a conversation to be like around where the Sacramento Kings could be in the conference. I think the Clippers are still going to make a push for the playoffs. Everybody's down on them with no Paul George, but I still think that the Mavericks, they're going to be 1-4 somewhere. If you're telling me in the season, they get to the year, Zion played 77 games. He has an all-NBA season, third-team all-NBA season. And we get to the end of the year and they've won 45, 46 games, that's very believable. The problem with the Western Conference is so stacked at the top that you have to have like Ultraman level talent in order to compete for a title. Zion isn't yet that kind of a player because even if you look at the top of the West, you got Luka Doncic with the Mavs, you got Jokic with the Denver Nuggets, and then on top of that, you're even going to have teams like Memphis coming out of nowhere, I think, with Ja Morant and Desmond Bane and Zach Edey and Jaren Jackson Jr., Gigi Jackson, when he gets healthy, coming back off the bench, Marcus Smart, Aldama. They're going to have a bunch of players. So the Pelicans are going to have to be able to beat teams in their tier with Zion on the court. Hope that this freshman rookie center turns out to be something and Daniel Tice can turn the clock back. And Brandon Ingram, can you have another all-star level year? DeJounte Murray, best bet, gets a two-way player again. If they can do all of that, then they can be a real contender for a playoff spot in the West. But outside of that, I don't know if they have the top-end talent to do anything else.
So for Zion to reach that all NBA level, it seems like he's got to take one or more of the tasks that the franchise wants him to take, which is defense. I mean, they've lost a lot of their interior defense. They want him to step up there, but they also want him to shoot more and shoot better from three. Wes, do you think either of those are likely to happen? Which is more likely? Which is more critical for him to be, an All NBA player this season?
Well, it's like Swipa was just talking about. There's a lot of if statements there with the Pelicans. A lot of things have to go right. Zion's going to be in charge of checking all of those boxes. And for the record, totally capable of doing all those things. You were talking about those names, Luka, Jokic, SGA, and the Thunder, all these guys. Zion can be as good as and has been as good as any of those guys on a per game basis for a game here and a game there. The problem is doing it for a full season. The problem is doing it for the playoffs. We have seen moments of Zion being absolutely dominant, but it's just a matter of putting it all together. My problem with the Pelicans is this. They don't have the roster. You were mentioning some other guys on like the Grizzlies roster, that stacked team, the stacked Thunder roster, all these. The Pelicans still don't have a center. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Yeah, I like Zion. I like Trey Murphy. I like Herb Jones. Brandon Ingram's fine. They have to figure out that situation. They have other guys on that roster that I like. But if they're starting Daniel Tice and asking Yves Missy as a rookie to step into that role as their starting five, that's not going to be enough to go up against Jokic or what it is, or Dallas's 48 minutes of legitimately good center play. And if you're asking now Zion to do that, again, he can do it. He could be the five and your top scorer for a game, for a few games, for a stretch. But he has never shown, and this goes back to my earlier point, the ability to do it for a sustained amount of time. And if that's the bet that you're making as the Pelicans, that's a risky bet to be making.
Yeah.
Now, Swipa, you were laughing. I wouldn't say hysterically, but you did double over a little bit there. What were you laughing at?
Well, I think Zion's played really well. I would even say like top 16 level player at his apex, but on a game by game basis, no, he's never been in SGA last year, Jokic or Luka's stat class.
He's had games. He's had games where he's just been as good as them.
I mean, hey, DeJounte Murray had a nice game last year versus the Boston Celtics. I guess Jimmy. So here's the thing. I think Zion is good enough as a scorer. He's one of the most talented interior finishers we have ever seen throughout the league history. So yes, his scoring is going to go insane. If Zion also is able to develop to be a competent, consistent defender, that's going to go a long way. If Zion can continue to develop to be a competent playmaker, that's going to help them go a long way. They have to be able to run an offense through Zion that's going beyond him attacking and finishing to him being able to distribute and play make for DeJounte, for CJ, for the rest of the roster, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. If he can be a better playmaker, I think that raises their ceiling, but we'll see if he has the ability to be able to do that this year with all of the other responsibilities he's going to have.
And as Wes said, look, they don't have a center. So if the Pelicans are playing competent to above average defense as this season moves on, then I think that's a narrative piece that can aid Zion Williamson in some kind of all NBA bid. And you need those narrative pieces sometimes to propel you in a stacked conference, which the Western Conference certainly is. Okay, great discussion. We've got more coming up on the Locked On NBA podcast. Ja Morant, we'll stay in the Western Conference. Ja Morant making his debut, and he injures his ankle, leaves the game, comes back. You have to hear the reaction from Locked On Grizzlies on the other side. Today's episode of the Locked On NBA podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you don't want to be guessing when you're buying tickets to an event, particularly like me. I was taking my family to a show about a popular cartoon character that happens to be blue. You may know what I'm talking about. And I wanted that process to be as easy as possible because you already have a lot of variables when you're taking your family out. So Game Time makes it easy. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching, scrolling through thousands of tickets to find the actual deal. And here's my favorite part of Game Time. It's the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, because you know if you've ever taken your family out to an event, again, a lot of variables, things can happen. So Game Time ticket coverage makes it very easy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Ja Morant went down with an ankle injury last night, not once, but twice in a preseason game that some might argue he shouldn't have been playing in at all. Is he too important to play through the pain? Here's Joe Mullinax of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast with his take.
Sometimes you have to save players from themselves. Sometimes you have to be the adult in the room and say, no, Ja, you are not going back in a meaningless preseason game, one in which Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and Jaren Jackson Jr. are not suited up. It is not worth it. Not here, not now, not ever.
Okay, Joe says no to Ja. What say you, Swipa? Was it a mistake for the Grizzlies to let Ja back into this preseason game?
Look, I think Ja wants to play. Ja has missed an incredible amount of time, partially due to injury, some due to his own decision-making, and I think Ja just wants to be there for his team. They have a brand new starting center that could end up being a dynamic 1-2 punch, but they have to develop chemistry, and that's what preseason is for. You can do a lot in practice and scrimmages, 5-on-5, but you're not going to get anything like you're getting real NBA action. And they played against Derek Lively yesterday. Najee Marshall. They had a good amount of defenders on the court. So how are we going to kind of maneuver this over the course of the season? So I actually respect Ja for wanting to play and then coming back and playing. And that's the thing about basketball. We've all turned an ankle before, and that wasn't that serious. And I think Ja felt like it wasn't. And then he came down from dunk, limped a little bit, but per the reports, it's not going to be anything substantial that's holding him out for any elongated amount of time. I think in this instance, I think Ja just wanted to go out with his team and try to figure out new chemistry as the lead point guard, lead playmaker. Marcus Smart's in the lineup now. They haven't played a lot of time together. So I'm not as upset about it, but I do think, just the preseason, you want to be a little bit more cautious, but no issue with them going back in.
So I understand everything you're saying, Swipa, but Ja is so critically important to that team. Wes, do you think that it was a mistake to let him back into that game? Or do you think they even had a choice, honestly? Did the franchise even have a choice whether or not he went back into that game?
In terms of the choice, probably not. As Swipe already said, ankle injuries, that's usually left to the players. Hey, how bad did I turn it? Do I do it? Do I just kind of pull on my shoestrings, tighten my sneakers, and go back out there? But in this instance, I do agree with Joe from Locked On Grizzlies because, look, yeah, you need to build time. As Swiper was saying, you have to get Ja Morant time with his new teammates, time with Zach Edey, all these guys. Hey, guess what? After this preseason game, you have 4 more of them. You have 4 more of them until you get to the regular season. And Ja Morant is so important, just like Zion, who we were just talking about. Maybe the 2 most important players in terms of just sort of their injury status and what it means to their teams and their basements and their ceilings. And also like Zion, with Ja Morant, every injury is something. It's always going to be something with both of these guys. Even if it looks like a minor ankle tweak, if you're the coaching staff, if you're the medical staff, if you're the front office, your antennas have to go up every time he's limping even a little bit because he's that vital to what that team is. And so as soon as he turns his ankle the first time, just be like, look, man, I understand you want to be out there. We respect it. We appreciate it. By the way, that lob that you threw to Zach Edey was sick. Congrats. We got the highlight. Shut it down for the night. We got 4 more preseason games. I think the Grizzlies, more than any other team in the league, need to start a strong start to the season. So if this thing does linger, because you never really know with these ankle injuries, even into the first week of the season or something, if he's not there for the regular season opener, that could be really detrimental because the Grizzlies need to get the bad taste of last season out of their mouth. They need to start strong and show them, okay, yeah, we're back to being a 50-win perennial team, and you just can't risk it because Ja Morant is everything for that team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to the injury itself. So the first time it was injured, it was like in a transition play, and the ball gets passed, a bounce pass that lands on his ankle, causing him to roll it. And then he leaves, comes back, and starts to limp and is pointing to the coach. And I don't know if a timeout could not have been called in that situation, but it was like a possession later when Ja decided to cut and get and catch a pass and dunk. And then he comes down and he's like, okay, and then he does the intentional foul and gets himself out of the game. So I think there are some questions too, just structurally about like, hey, can we like pay attention to the star player wanting out of the game at that point and get him out as quickly as possible? Very interesting discussion. And listen, because I cover the Hornets for Locked On Hornets, I am an ankle injury specialist. I have to cover LaMelo Ball. So there's a lot of talk about, the fear of seeing what LaMelo can do on that ankle. And my opinion is you got to test it. Now, I know it's not an ankle injury history with Ja Morant, but with these injuries, you got to let them see if they can play because they're going to get nicked up throughout the season. They're either going to be able to stay healthy or they're not. But yeah, he's a super important player. Ja Morant is to the Grizzlies. Let's stay on the injury front and talk about Shaden Sharp for the Portland Trailblazers. We got news that he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. And with him sidelined, the Portland Trailblazers have a major decision to make about their starting lineup. One name the Blazers will consider is Scoot Henderson. The former 3rd overall pick is looking to put his rough rookie season behind him. But Mike Richmond from Locked On Blazers has questions about a backcourt fit with Anthony Simons. Let's hear from him.
Neither of them are likely to ever be like plus defenders. Scoot certainly has tools, I think, to be like a good defender, right? Like he might end up being like a pretty good playmaker on defense in terms of getting steals, but I think his size will limit like his overall positive impact. But there's a world in which he's a good defender. There's not a world in which Aaron is a good defender. It's just he's too deep into his career, right? It is what it is. And playing them both together, you're just undersized, and teams are going to pick on you if you're undersized. You're just going to need to be bigger to be effective on defense in the NBA.
Okay, there's fewer people that I respect in terms of X's and O's and basketball analysis than Mike Richmond from the Locked On Trailblazers podcast. But don't the Trailblazers have to see what they have in Scoot Henderson? And isn't this a perfect opportunity, Wes?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I like Mike. I think he does a great job with that Trailblazers podcast. He's dead wrong right now. I mean, what do we talk? We're talking about fit in the backcourt for what? The Portland Trailblazers who are going to win 16 games this year? Who cares about fit? You're trying to accumulate talent right now, and you're trying to develop that talent. And the NBA is not like the NFL. You know this, Swipa, where we're not talking about a young quarterback who has to sit on the bench and learn the playbook for a little while. The NBA, especially with young point guards, is not like that. They got to get out there. They got to see NBA level defenses. They got to see the shapes. They got to see it all in front of them so that they can get better. And by the way, you need to be starting. You got to be playing against the best defensive players, the best defensive schemes, all that stuff. The fact that Scoot Henderson wasn't already in pen a starter for this Trailblazers team is insane. Yeah. He was going to be coming off the bench behind Anthony Simons and Shaden Sharp. Like, what are we doing here? You just took this guy 3rd overall. There were some people saying that he should have been the 2nd overall pick. There were some people saying if not for Victor Wembanyama, he'd be the 1st pick in most NBA drafts. And you're bringing him off the bench. I know it wasn't a good rookie season. So what? If you're bringing him off the bench, it's just going to take him more time to get him to the point where you want him to be if you're Portland, because this is the franchise. This guy is the guy. He was the franchise pick. You got to get him out there, and you got to get him out there now. And look, if it took an unfortunate injury to Shaden Sharp, no doubt, but if it took an injury to Shaden Sharp to get them to start Scoot Henderson, it might have been the best thing that could have happened to this team, is having one of their better players injured, because it's honestly bananas to me that he wasn't already in pen in that starting unit.
Swipa, are the Portland Trailblazers bananas to not start Scoot?
Yeah, but I think this is more of a question about Anthony Simons than anything. Like Shaden Sharp needs to play. Scoot Henderson needs to play. I think Anthony Simons is a really good player, but he doesn't project anything for me except for a rotational player, not a great team as a starter, or somebody can come off your bench, give you buckets when you need to, but when you need to make a defensive substitution, he needs to go out. I just don't think Anthony Simons has that kind of ceiling. We already seen this with Damian Lillard. They tried it, had a dynamic scoring backcourt, but he doesn't bring anything else that you need to be able to win at a high level. Anthony Simons, similar to CJ McCollum, I think it's just kind of going to be pegged into this role as a very good scorer who doesn't offer a lot on the other end, or even his playmaking not good enough to where you can compensate for some of the things he lacks. I just think Anthony Simons having Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson is already too much. I think at some point they're going to move one of them, but I think with Scoot was just wildly inefficient last year, wildly reckless at times last year, but he's also very young. And I think when you have a guard that his skill set is built around his physicality, his athleticism, you kind of have to let them work that out over the course of time. I think similar to Russell Westbrook, he wasn't as good as Russ's rookie year, but I think that's a player that his comp has been likened to. And I think in order for him to get there, he's going to have to play a lot. He's going to have to be bad a lot. But again, you get to the end of the season, maybe you get a Jalen Green month in the month of March where all of a sudden he's averaging 22, 5 and 5. The numbers look good. The efficiency looks good. He's figuring out how to get people involved with DeAndre Ayton and Donovan Clingan in them. Then you can get it to moving. But right now, I think Scoot has to play. It's just going to be rough, probably for most of the year.
Okay, let me steel man this then a little bit and see if I can get any movement here. Is playing him when you know you're going to get scorched on the defensive end of the floor, is that beneficial to Scoot to put him essentially out of position? And I mean, it could only be a month into the season, so it's not for an entire season. But does that get him off to such a rough start, considering his rookie year did not go as planned? Is that a bad idea long term for Scoot?
They're getting scorched anyway. Ayton,
Exactly.
Jeremy Grant, and all them, they're getting cooked. So this whole team is going to be bad. The only positive defender they have on the roster for real, Shaden could get there, is Denny. That's it. And so they're already
They got Matisse Thybulle.
Yeah.
But yeah, this team, if we're talking about fit, we're talking about defense. The Trailblazers don't have the luxury of worrying about fit or defense. All they have to do is get their players who they are invested in out there and get them better. If there's no fit, if there's none of that, it doesn't matter. All these guys just have to develop and see more NBA reps. That's all that's important for this Trailblazers team. The fact that Mike's even talking about fit and winning games is just insane to me. That is, I don't know what team that we're looking at here. They're going to stink this year. The best thing you can, no matter who they play or what lineups they put out there, they're gonna stink. The best thing that the Trailblazers could do is get the players who they're invested in better between now and the end of the year.
As a fellow coverer, is that a word? Coverer of a team that has also been basement dwelling, I will stick up for Mike and say that we just so desperately want to see the team that we cover make sense that we will go to any lengths in our sick basketball brain to make it all make sense. But great discussion there. We've got more coming up here on this edition of Locked On NBA. Coming up, the Orlando Magic. They did an extension, but it was not Jaylen Suggs. We'll tell you who it was and why what it could mean for the Magic and how they approach their next playoff run. That's coming up on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of the Locked On NBA podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. And maybe if you think that this Ja Morant ankle injury is not a huge deal and you want to get plus 3,400 right now on his MVP odds, well, you can do that at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every single day. News out of the Orlando Magic franchise and news that came from Shams, fresh off of him joining ESPN. I know that the morning show, the morning Locked On NBA podcast, go check that out. They dove into that decision of Shams moving over to ESPN. We'll stick with the news that Shams broke, which is that center Wendell Carter Jr.'s contract extended by the Orlando Magic, 3 years, $59 million, keeping him under contract through the 28-29 season. This move really solidifies the Orlando Magic team's defensive core as they continue building around a philosophy that prioritizes defensive strength over the offensive strategies that are really have been dominating the NBA for many years. Here's Locked On Magic's Philip Rossman-Reich on the Magic's double down on D.
There is not a game that the Magic should go into this year that they do not believe they can win, because they know their defense is good enough to give them a chance to win. They know that if they play defense with the intensity and physicality that they know they can reach, they are good enough to win. Defense travels. Defense travels into the playoffs. How does a team with the worst offensive rating in the entire postseason take another really good offensive team to 7 games in a playoff series? How does that happen? It's because of the defense. It's because the Magic have an elite and strengthening defense.
Are the Magic, are they magicians? Are they alchemists? Are they hackers? Are they doing an expert zag against the zig of all of these 5-out offenses that we're seeing all over the league compete for championships? Or are they stacking the deck against themselves? Swipa, you got the first word.
The question being, are they putting themselves in a position to win a championship this year?
Or ever by going all in on defense at the expense of not bringing in more shooting?
Yeah, I mean, if Paolo Banchero leaps to superstar status, if Franz Wagner can reach to an all-star status, he might already be there pretty soon, then yeah, sure. But I think what people have to realize about championship teams, you need a very good defense, meaning you need rim protection, which can be schemed, or an elite rim protector. You need POA defenders that can rotate and, in particular, play off ball really well. And you need players that know how to be where they're supposed to be when they need to be there. And then on the other end, you need shot making, you need shot creation, and you need high-level finishing. The Magic don't have almost any of that so far offensively, but I think that's more so going to be contingent on Paulo's development. He shot better from mid-range in the playoffs than he did from the rim versus Cleveland. So they're going to need to be able to develop their players, their offensive players, and Paolo and Franz, maybe Anthony Black. I don't know what Jet Howard and them is going to be, but they have to be able to take several leaps to be able to get into fourth quarter situations or playoff situations for set half court defenses and find easy manufacturable ways to score within the scheme of the offense, and not just hoping that Paolo's able to score off a fadeaway post.
Wes, can they make any kind of jump doubling down on the defensive end of the floor?
Well, they were already elite defensively last year, and we saw where that got them. They got them into the playoffs, and congrats to the Orlando Magic. It had been a minute, but it didn't take them past basically the first round. And so you look at what the Orlando Magic have to do to make that next step. I understand everybody saying they need to get shooting, they need to get playmaking and all that stuff. And look, they're not wrong. I do like the fact that they are putting Paolo and Franz under the stress test right now of being like, hey, we didn't go out and get a real point guard. Y'all have to figure that part out. And I like that because they're not going to win the championship this year. It wasn't ever going to happen. You're trying to develop your best players. And I like the idea of developing them under force, essentially, under duress, if even. But here's what the Magic did this year, because I also don't think that the right point guard or anybody else was there for them. There was talk about Malik Monk or even Anthony Simons. Those guys don't move the needle for the Magic. Come on. They're not making them any more notably better. What they just did, in this summer re-signed Wendell Carter Jr., who, by the way, is he going to be known as Shams' first break at ESPN now? Because it's maybe the only notable thing he's done in the NBA so far. Is being the first break for Shams after the ESPN move. But you've got Wendell Carter Jr., you re-sign Mo Wagner, you re-sign Gogo Batadze, you've already got Jonathan Isaac under contract who plays 5 for them sometimes, even though I don't think he should. And you've got all these guys. We just saw what their identity right now is on the defensive end, but they've got so many guys at that center spot now. It just feels like one of them is going to get traded, if not more. And so we just saw what the New York Knicks did, shifting their identity, being like, you know what, we're this tough team with Isaiah Hartenstein, Dante DiVincenzo, the Villanova guys, whatever. And in one offseason, they go, boom, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to go 5 out now. We've got Karl Anthony Towns. We're going to make some moves with some of these good contracts that we have. I think the Magic have positioned themselves to make that move. So if they decide at some point we do need a little bit more of an offensive jolt, and the player who we really want is out there now, they have the draft picks and they have the chunky contracts that you need to get that deal done. My question is, where's the Jaylen Suggs extension? Because that's the one that really needs to happen. If you really want to double down on defense and make that your identity, nobody on that roster is more important to what they do defensively than Jaylen Suggs. That extension needs to come soon because you can't risk that guy getting to restricted free agency next summer because newsflash, contending teams are going to pay that dude. They're going to want that guy. They need to re-sign Jaylen Suggs.
Yeah,
it's not that the Magic were bad at outside offense. It's that they didn't even really try. They were 25th in 3-point attempt rate last season, and Jaylen Suggs, it was one of the guys that was tossing up a few of those 3-point shots and doing it somewhat efficiently. But judging by the look on Swipa's face, I don't know that he's buying the importance of.
No, we're about to get some Jonathan Isaac propaganda here.
No, it's not propaganda. It's just understanding that the best per minute defender in the league is Jonathan Isaac. But I also think that Jaylen Suggs is at the top of the conversation in best POA defenders in the league, especially on ball. So this is not to diminish Suggs. I think more so this is to prop up that this is how talented they are. That Jaylen Suggs would be the best defender on most teams in the league. And they have an even better defender in Jonathan Isaac that's going to be a rotational player for them. But their defensive ceiling is like, they're going to run, think about this, Suggs, KCP, Paolo, Franz, Wendell, and then off the bench, they still got Gary Harris. They're going to be able to bring the best per-minute defender in the league in Jonathan Isaac off the bench. They still got Mo Wagner, Batazde, and then Anthony Black. They're loaded, like across the board. All their rotation players, except for Cole Anthony, they're all defenders. So if they can find some way to manufacture offense, and I'll even tell you this, I think the Boston Celtics are a great, great example for them. How do you have a team with two elite wings? I'm not saying that Franz and Paolo really get to that place where they're both elite wings, and you surround them with defenders. You surround them with dudes who can shoot. Wendell can shoot a little bit, he just doesn't have high volume, and then just get up shots. Suggs, shoot the ball. KCP, shoot the ball. Paolo, shoot the ball. Franz, shoot the ball. And all you do is increase your volume. I think that alone will take them to another tier offensively. They're just going to have to decide, okay, end of the game, fourth quarter, last 5 minutes, what is the offense we can actually run with our personnel that will help us get over the top?
I just respect any team that looks at the entirety of the strategy and philosophy of what's happening in the NBA and says, "Nah, I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to go completely in the opposite direction and try this other thing." I think it might make some of the games with the Magic and the elite offensive teams in the league somewhat more interesting to watch. If everyone's the same, that can't be as interesting a product. So it'll be really interesting. I'm also scared for the Orlando Magic in that if it doesn't work, because what I'm hearing from you guys is it's really going to take a significant leap from one of those players offensively, whether it be Franz or one of those wings. Offensively, they've got to make a leap in order to make this all work. And if it doesn't, and they do extend Suggs and they get to the deadline without letting him go in restricted free agency, or they have to go and match someone that wants Suggs, then it's going to be much more difficult, I think, to unwind that experiment than it was to wind it up. What do you think about that, Wes?
No, that's right. And look, the Celtics model is the model long term, right? The Celtics even decided, hey, we're going to develop our two wings in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, get them to all NBA status, and then we can kind of surround them with some other players who make a little bit more sense and unlock the offense that we want to unlock. But that took two major trades, shipping out Marcus Smart, adding Kristaps Porzingis, adding Drew Holiday, Derek White over the last few years. The Magic have the opportunity to do that. Jaylen Suggs is that defender, that point of attack defender that every elite defense needs. I'm saying if they do not sign him to an extension, there's going to be a team, just like the Celtics were willing to pay Drew Holiday and Derek White, giving him $30+ million a year. I think the hardest thing in the NBA, and this does not mean the most valuable thing, but the hardest thing to find in the NBA is a guard who can defend his position at an elite level. There might be less than a half dozen of those guys in the NBA, true elite level. Jaylen Suggs is one of those guys. They got to lock him up. And then we also saw another model for what the Magic are trying to do, and that's the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
And Anthony Edwards took that huge leap last year. That's more of the short-term model. If the Celtics are the long-term model, the Timberwolves could be the short-term model where Anthony Edwards takes that leap, can basically turn them into a almost average offense just by himself, essentially. And yeah, they added some other pieces. Mike Conley is a table setter and all these things. Karl Anthony Towns, elite offensive shot maker at the center spot, all those things. But it took a leap for them to even kind of flirt with average offense, and that needs to come from Paolo Banchero or perhaps even Franz Wagner or both of them. And if they can make that leap collectively, then yeah, maybe you start to see that offensive efficiency float up to about league average a little bit more. But look, they were never going to be elite offensively, so you might as well just double down on what you're at elite on already. Like, I have no problem with that. I think the Magic have a plan, though, and this idea that we're just pigeonholing them into just like a defensive first team that's never going to score, and that they did a huge detriment to the team by not going and getting more shooting or playmaking this summer, I think it's extremely short-sighted. So this team is still so young, and they have so many things that they can do, and I think they're built to do it, that when I'm thinking about the Orlando Magic, I'm not thinking about this year. I'm thinking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, because that's the sweet spot for them.
All right. Well, great discussion. A lot of opinions there. Let us know what you think. I'm going to put polls up on our YouTube community page. So go follow Locked On NBA or go subscribe and set your notifications to on the Locked On NBA YouTube page. Head over to the community part of that page and let us know what you think on those polls. Finally, we're going to end today's show with something we're calling, Is This Something? Each panelist will offer a stat, an anecdote, or an observation, and we'll ask, is this something? Wes, you're first.
Well, I don't know if you guys watched this. Well, you didn't because it wasn't on TV. Monday night, the Miami Heat had their annual red, white, and pink scrimmage. It's an inter-squad scrimmage, and usually it means nothing. But here's something that I do think means something. Bam Adebayo, 5 for 11 on three-pointers in a, yes, semi-serious scrimmage against his own teammates. But the dude took 11 three-pointers in a semi-serious basketball game. He's not going to take 11 in regular NBA games, but if he takes 2 or 3, and we saw him start to, he averaged 1.5 3-point attempts per game over the last 20 games of last season. He was willingly taking threes during the Olympics for Team USA. That was more of a culmination of hard work, those 11 threes in the scrimmage, than it was just Shaquille O'Neal taking threes in an all-star game willy-nilly just for fun. Bam's going to make that a part of his game, and I think him taking 11 threes in front of fans was a statement of exactly that. Again, he's not going to be Klay Thompson from three-point range all of a sudden at that volume, but I think 2 to 3 a game definitely is wheelhouse, and that has the potential to change Miami's offense that is in desperate need of more shooting, more spacing around him and Jimmy Butler, that has been in the bottom 10 in offensive rating for 2 years now. Bam taking threes isn't going to solve all of that, but it's going to be a big deal to that offense. It is absolutely something, even if it appears to be nothing.
Semi-serious basketball. I think that's what people are calling what's happening in Atlanta right now. I'm sorry, Hawks fans. I'm sorry. I just don't know what's going on there. Okay, Swipa, is this something?
Look, I am kind of stuck on Isaiah Hartenstein, OKC Thunder. He had 7 assists last night. Just imagine Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, SGA, Lou Dort, J-Dub, Alex Caruso, whoever. Just imagine the different kinds of offensive schemes you're going to be able to run with a DHO partner like Isaiah Hartenstein with Chet Holmgren coming off that ball and being able to get downhill as a dribble penetrator or even stepping out off that. And then on top of that, Hartenstein's ability to hit that floater, his touch around the rim. I think it's something that they were able to, with no first-round pick required, to insert Isaiah Hartenstein and all the great things he did in the New York Knicks series versus the 76ers last year, and somehow insert that into their lineup for nothing. And then all of a sudden, I think he's going to help take their offense as well as their defense to another level because of his connected passing. So I think it's something that they've added one of the best offensive rebounders in the league, one of the best passers from the center position in the league, and they also got like very good rim protection. This, even with some of the flaws they're going to have offensively come playoff time, that could be the thing that pushes them over the top to get to the NBA championship.
I think that's definitely something. Sorry, Wes. Anything that happens in a scrimmage game, I can't say that that's something. But they will play the Charlotte Hornets tonight in the preseason, so we'll see if he lifts 11 three-pointers in that game. That's going to do it for this special edition of Locked On NBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Become a fantasy basketball expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Josh Lloyd. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on